Thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Noso Namani and I welcome you to this conversation. Today's session by saying that it is very, very important and critical for us to have this conversation because almost all of us are looking for change. All of us are going about change, the process of change, because there is one thing in our life that we would want to see change in. Maybe in our personal life, in our business, in our relationship or marriages, in our academics as students. Many of us have different areas of our life where we desire change. And the important aspect of this conversation is to help you understand how change comes. Okay? Change does not come from your outside environment. Change is something that happens within you. And then what happens outside you is simply a manifestation of whatever state, whatever condition that you are finding yourself within. Okay? So success flows from inside out, it doesn't flow from outside in. Who you are within determines who you are without. Okay, so last week we started this conversation. If you were not here last week, I will encourage you to pick up what we shared last week, listen to it so that you can be able to follow through. I shared a lot in terms of the mind, how changing your mind, reshaping your mind is going to help you make that transition from where you are to where you want to be. Today I want to be focusing on the power of choice, okay? The power of taking responsibility. And I'm taking the cue from what I introduced last week. Last week I said that there's a difference between liberation and freedom. While liberation can change you physically, can reposition you physically, it takes freedom for you to experience your destiny. It takes freedom for you to experience whatever you desire in God. And most times we fall short of destiny, we fall short of freedom's promise because we fail to understand the power of choice, the power of decision. Okay? Now, if I say, would you like to make a choice? Everybody wants to make a choice. Nobody on earth you will offer the right to make a choice. In fact, it is recognized that one key aspect of human right is the ability to make a choice, to make a decision of who you are, what you want to be identified as, where you want to live, where you want to go. We have the power of choice enshrined as a right. I remember when Africa was fighting for their independence, there were a lot of conversations whether Africa can manage their resources and become, great nation and contribute their quota globally. And one known African leader said that it is Africa's right to manage or mismanage their resources. Meaning that whether we manage it well or we mismanage it, it is within our rights to do that. So nobody should deny us, our liberation. Nobody should deny us our independence. So, but why everyone desires the power and the ability to make choice? Most of us are not truly embracing the power to make choice. In fact, we run from it. Okay, it might sound strange to some of us, but I'm going to take time to break it down. Okay, one key aspect that restricts human destiny, that restricts human life, is their inability to take responsibility, their inability to take charge. Because what happens is that freedom comes with responsibility. Freedom comes with taking charge. When you are a slave or where you are bound, you almost do everything except one thing, except making choices. Okay? So, for instance, if you are a slave working in a farm, it is your boss that determines the planting season. It is your slave master that determines the type of seed you are going to sow. He knows how to differentiate the good seed and the bad seed. All he does is he brings the seed to you and he tells you to plant. You start tilling the ground. When it's time for harvest, he comes to you, tells you it's time for harvest. Harvest begins. When it's time to make a sale, he's the one that does all the management issues surrounding making sales, doing profit, doing management. So in fact, as a slave, what happens is that you don't have control. But what happens over time is that lack of control becomes something that we now desire. We now want to be in a place where others make choices for us. We now want to find ourselves in certain conditions where we desire to enjoy the benefits of life without the weight of carrying the decision or the responsibility that bets the kind of life that we desire. And that is why you see, even at a national level, it is a difference, between great nations and poor nations. Okay, poor nations are nations that, even though they desire independence, but they don't want to take responsibility for their choices. They don't want to carry the weight and the burden that responsibility brings. So what happens is that we constantly creep back into dependence. We constantly creep back into the things that have held us in the past that we want to so much go out from. When you look at the story of the Israelites, you remember that, why bringing them out of Egypt was God's idea. You discover that they were praying for it. There was a time they were praying and crying, asking God, where are you? Why are you not saving us? Okay, God came miraculously, took them out of Egypt. The same people came into the wilderness and they wanted to elect a leader to go back to Egypt. Why? They were confronted with the power to make decisions. They were confronted with the power of choice. They were confronted with one thing: the fact that from today you become responsible for your life. You become responsible for where you live. You become responsible for your own security. You become responsible to think about your life, your future, your present, everything about you. And many of us are not prepared to be able to make that choice. Okay? Before I go deep into talking about responsibility, I want to mention some symptoms that will help you identify where you belong. Whether you belong in the place where you are liberated, or whether you belong in a place where you can say that you are truly free. Okay? I want to give out some symptoms. First, when you see yourself moving in circular motion without progressive results, you might be experiencing some form of liberation, but you have not attained personal freedom. Okay, you find yourself oscillating. There is some form of movement, but it's a circular movement. There is no progress. There is no decisive progress that is moving you from one state of life to a more progressive state of life. Okay, it's only circular motion. When you find yourself struggling with indecision, okay, you want to move forward, you want to move back. You want to move back, you want to move forward. You want to go right, you want to go left. Indecision is a sign of a liberated person who have not experienced freedom. When you are not visionary, when you don't have energy to achieve, to carry a vision, to carry a burden, to become someone who is constantly being driven within themselves with a zeal to make a difference, a zeal to create a condition that is different from where they are, to something that is as a desire of their heart. When you find yourself struggling with that, it's an issue. It's an issue of being liberated but not attaining personal freedom. Another symptom I'll also mention is courage. Lack of courage. If you constantly find yourself, oscillating with fear, trying to, ask yourself, if I make this decision, is it going to turn out right? Will I fail? Will things work out the way I expect them to work out? Whenever you find yourself in that state, is a sign that tells you that you have not attained personal freedom. And most times what happens is that some of these things I mentioned, we can find ourselves, hiding it under Christianity. Okay? Hence you find a lot of people who struggle with indecision, they can tell you they are waiting on God. You find people who are fearful, they can tell you they are waiting on God. You find people who lack courage and vision to embrace life, they will tell you that they're waiting for God to say something. But at the same time, you understand that everything the Bible shows us is that God wants to make gods out of us. He wants to make sons out of us. It means that He wants us to take responsibility. He wants to bring us to the place of vision. When you go to the Garden of Eden, you will see God will bring animals to Adam. He will want them to name them. He wanted him to take initiative. He wanted him to dream. He wanted him to vision. Okay, what can you make out of this? What can you build out of life? What can you see out of life? So you see that the life that was created in the time of Adam is so much different from what you experience today as a result of men exploring the giftings, the initiatives that is embedded within them. When you are not someone who is championing your own personal initiatives, your own, not necessarily trying to start something new or start something different, but wherever you find yourself in life, there must be that visionary mindset. There must be that energy within you to be able to make a difference, to have a vision, to do things differently. That is one of the things, the key important things that show that a person has attained personal freedom. And like I said, when you look at it at an individual level, you also see that at a national level. You see nations that are not just, you know, talking about independence, but having experienced freedom. You see the way they plan about their country is different. The vision for their land, the vision for their future is different. The conversation is different because they know that as free men, they must take responsibility. And the reason why many of us avoid responsibility is that it comes with weight. Just the way it sounds as responsibility, it comes with weight. It means that you now begin to have to think about yourself. The Bible said that as soon as the people of Israelites entered the promised land, the manna stopped flowing. Why? They were expected to start tilling the ground. They were expected to start planting crops. They were expected to start making decisions, key decisions on every area of their life. They have to plan for their security. They have to plan for their light. They have to plan for their irrigation. Whatever it is, whatever required, to build a nation, they have to sit down under God and begin to figure it out and begin to take action and begin to take decisive action, to bring themselves into the destiny that they are supposed to be. Okay? So why God can empower your mind, why the Holy Spirit can speak into your heart to empower your mind. A person who is free understands that they need to empower their will. They need to take action based on their will. They need to be able to infuse energy into whatever they believe God is saying to them, whatever they believe the dream of their heart is. They need to be able to infuse energy into it, take action, and then begin to move forward. Okay? So freedom comes with a price. Freedom comes with a price. And that is why the moment you begin to take responsibility from your life, it is discomforting. Okay? Everybody likes to spend. Everybody likes to, buy things that they like. Few people like discipline. Why? Because it is seen as a form of responsibility, as a form of restriction for you to plan and prepare for the future rather than taking advantage of it now. Okay? So freedom comes with responsibility. It comes with you being able to manage yourself. When you are a slave, what happens is that somebody is managing your life. Somebody is making decisions for you. Okay? But the moment you are liberated and you become free, you need to start being independent in your mind, being independent in your actions, and you need to start managing your life. You need to start managing your environment. You need to start managing your own success. Okay? And that is why most of us not ready to embrace that responsibility of freedom, not able to, embrace the weight of choice. What happens is that we draw back, we slip back into slavery, we slip back into dependence because we are not able to embrace the future, the responsibility required for us to be truly free men and women. So when we talk about transformation, when we talk about rewiring yourself for a lasting success, a key aspect of that rewiring is understanding that you have to take responsibility for your life. You have to take ownership and you have to take charge. Okay? So without doing that, what happens is that sometimes, in the effort for us to change, what happens is that we can even relocate, we can even change environment. So oftentimes you see people, maybe they can relocate from Nigeria to America, or from America to UK, or from UK to China. A change of location does not always necessitate to a change of life. It doesn't necessarily lead to transformation. Because what happens is that the mind is not changed. The ability to take responsibility is not changed. So even though there is a change to a new location, there is no change in terms of transformation because the mind is still the same. The attitude is still the same. Your inability to take responsibility for your life, make the right choices to make progress, if it is still lacking, no matter what happens in terms of your physical circumstances, you will constantly find yourself being stuck. So, a slave who has been freed or who has been liberated will still see the symptoms of slavery, will still see the symptoms of being dependent on somebody else, except they begin to take actions to attain real freedom. So what are the things that responsibility demands? There are three things I will mention to you that responsibility demands. Okay? The first one is you must be able to prioritize your life. In managing yourself effectively, to be able to manage or attain self-leadership and self-management, you must be able to prioritize your life. You must be able to prioritize your life. In prioritizing your life, you need to be able to identify your vision. You need to be able to identify your legacy. You need to be able to identify your goals. You need to be able to ask yourself, what exactly am I living for? What exactly is my pursuit? What am I aiming? What is my goal? What am I trying to achieve? People who are free understand what their priorities are. They understand what their goals are. They understand what their visions are. They don't oscillate in between choices. They are not inconsistent. They know what they are building. They don't just want to socialize. They know they are builders. They don't just want to make friends. They don't just want to show off. They don't just want to do things like every other person. They are focused. They know what their priorities are. You know, when God was talking to the people of Israelites, he said, today I give you power to make choices. Okay? And he said, choose life or choose death, choose light, choose darkness. You have the power of choice. Whatever you choose, that is what you are going to make your life out of it. But you see, most times, why decisions are difficult is that first, we are not able to prioritize. And without prioritizing, you don't know what choice to make. Okay, so if you don't prioritize what you are supposed to save on, if you don't prioritize where you are supposed to go, where you are supposed to live, how to conduct your life, then everything that comes around you looks like is the result you are looking for. And that is why we struggle with making decisions. You must be able to prioritize your life. You must be able to ask yourself, what are the things in my life that are important to me? What my vision? What am I building? Where am I going? Where is my life headed to? Okay, so for the children of Israelites, when they left Egypt, the goal was to get into the promised land, to possess God's dream, to possess God's destiny for their life. And it looked like only two individuals, Caleb and Joshua, were focused on that dream. Every other person were oscillating, indecision, inconsistency. They want to go forward, they also want to go back. And that was how they were stuck in the wilderness for 40 years. Many of us will say, okay, they were stuck because God was teaching them. Yes, but the lesson was not meant to be 40 years. The lesson was meant to be 40 days. It took them 40 years because they were stuck in the old mindset. They were not able to prioritize. Do you want the promised land or do you want Egypt? And as long as they were not able to take hold of the power of choice, they constantly found themselves in a place where they never attained their destiny. The second thing I want to mention is that you must be able to organize. In self-management, you don't just prioritize, you have to organize. That is why we have had teachings on systems, how to organize your life, how to organize your life around your priorities. So when you understand what your priority is, you now begin to organize your life around priorities. Now, many of us don't have any significant achievement year in, year out Because we don't organize around our priorities. We thinking that maybe because we prayed that something is just going to happen to us. We view Christianity as magic. Okay, because I go to church, because I pray, then suddenly things will happen in my life. Yes, I believe in miracles, but they are not the way of life. Okay, you must be able to identify your priorities, and then you need to organize around your priorities. Organize your self development around your priorities. Organize your finances around your priorities. Organize your relationships around your priorities. If you don't organize your life, you are going to constantly find yourself slipping back to bondage. So, what happens is that you become attracted to people who are organized. What is it that Egypt had that made them to be able to keep the children of Israelites in bondage for up to 400 years? Egypt was organized. They had their own system. When the Israelites came to the wilderness, God was handing Moses over systems. He was giving him laws. Moses wrote laws on agriculture. He wrote laws on marriage. He wrote laws about management of a society, the environment. How do you handle issue of murder? He went into justices. Issues that will help them govern a nation. But it was being too sophisticated. A slave mindset, a liberated mind that is still under the yoke of slavery, finds it too complex to organize. We find too much complexity in organizing. So what happens is that when given an opportunity or when handed over the responsibility to organize, it becomes so much overwhelming. We want somebody else to help us organize. And the moment you relinquish that ability to organize to somebody else to organize it for you, you are bringing yourself under that person and you are bringing yourself back to bondage. And that is why, if you truly want freedom, you must be able to prioritize. If you truly want freedom, you must be able to organize. Your inability to do that, you will always find somebody else handling and managing your life for you. Okay? The last thing I want to mention is that you must now live a life of discipline. Okay? Why is it important? Because it takes discipline to focus on your priorities, to continue to organize until you find the results. It takes discipline to identify your priorities, continuing on that priority, continuing on what you have organized around those priorities until you find results. Free men are the ones that have attained that level of discipline. If you find yourself constantly struggling with discipline around your priorities, constantly struggling with discipline around your organization, it's simply telling you that you are still stuck with the old mindset and your mind needs to be renewed so that you can start embracing your success, so that you can start embracing your destiny. Okay? A release from oppression does not guarantee freedom. I want to say that again. A release from oppression does not guarantee freedom. What guarantees freedom is that you are able to take responsibility for your life, take responsibility for your choices, and then you begin to embrace your destiny. You are not waiting for someone to make those choices for you. You are making that choices for yourself because you know that it is only you that can change you. It is only you that can build the kind of life that you want. When we look up to God, asking God to make a change, something happened to me one day in the place of prayer. I can never forget it, so many years ago. I was crying to God, asking Him for help, telling Him to come and assist me and, get me to get, going and get things done. And I felt the Holy Spirit telling me that, you see, there is a place that I am and there is a place that you are. Where you are, things don't work. My job is to bring you up to where I am, where things work, so that you can begin to see like me, think like me, act like me, and then get things working. But the problem is that you are trying to bring me down to where you are. If I come down to where you are, we are still going to do things the way you do it, and nothing changes, and you won't see any results. And God said that the goal for you is to constantly live where you are, come up to where I am, so that you can see things differently, do things differently, and be able to build the life dream that you want. And most of us, I believe today, we are trying to drag God down to our level. So instead of changing, we want God to come down to our level and meet us. But you see, where you are, things are not working already. Where you are, things are not moving the way you want to do. And the reason things are not working where you are is because of your mindset. It's because of what you know. It's because of your level of knowledge, your level of understanding, your inability to take responsibility, your inability to prioritize, your inability to organize, your inability to embrace discipline that is required to create a life that works. And God is saying, come up to where I am so that you can see my mindset. You can understand how I think. You can understand how I organize. You can understand how I do things. And then you will be able to reproduce that in your own life. The goal of Christianity is not, somebody handing you a magic wand, okay? Handing you a magic formula that whenever you say it, something happens, or whenever you embrace it, something magical happens in your life. That is why most of us, we go to church year in, year out, nothing is not working, they give up. They say church is not working, church is calm, this one and that one. Because you think that by associating yourself with church, life is going to change. No. Giving your life to Christ is a call to embrace freedom. And what is freedom? Is the burden of choice. Is the burden of responsibility. Is calling you to say, okay, live the life that you have, move to the life that will give you results. That is what giving your life to Christ means. Giving your life to Christ is not just a prayer made in church. It's not just an emotional moment where you say, okay, God, I give my life to you. No. Giving your life to Christ is a time you make a decision to deliberately embrace your life, embrace a life of responsibility, and begin to make daily choices that move your life towards your destiny. Why most times it can look like an emotional responsibility, as an emotional decision, it is something that calls you to a place of decision. It actually calls you to a place of work. Freedom is work. Giving your life to Christ is work. That is why many people struggle with it, because you are being handed over a responsibility. Then you give your life to Christ, you pick up work. You are no longer lazy. You have to wake up and do something with your life. So your ability to avoid the things that brings you to freedom is what is keeping many of us in slavery. Okay, so without that mental transformation, without that transition, we will constantly find ourselves in a place that we don't want. We will constantly find ourselves in a place that we don't desire. So what is true freedom? True freedom is self-management. True freedom is self-leadership. True freedom is holding yourself accountable, persevering until you achieve the results that you desire. So today I want to encourage you to go sit down and ask yourself, where exactly do I find myself? Where am I? Am I simply liberated, or am I a person who is free? Am I going through a journey of liberation, or am I going through a journey of freedom? Am I thinking different? Am I, facing my life headlong? Do I have zeal to make a difference? Do I have zeal to bring myself out of where I am to where I need to be? That is what real freedom, real transformation calls. Okay? So this is how I end it. This is how I bring this particular teaching today to the closure. And what I want to ask you is, are you going to live up to freedom's promise? Are you going to live up to the destiny of becoming someone who is free? Or are you going to embrace the life of dependence, the life of where you are just satisfied with liberation, satisfied with where you are and what you have? Or are you going to move towards freedom, to embrace the power of choice, to be able to make decisions for yourself, to be able to make decisions for your life, to be able to make decisions for your destiny, to bring yourself to a place where you are progressively moving forward and not just oscillating around circular motion. I want to encourage you to like, share, and also join us next week. And there's a link in the description. Please click it to join our community where you can find like-minded men and women who are on the path of freedom, who are on the path of embracing the choice to make a difference, not just in their life, but in the life of others. We call it a place where we are mentoring leaders to become transformers across the earth. Looking forward to meet you personally. Thank you and God bless you. Bye.